All right. Yeah. So let's see. We are wrapping up our second week where we've been introducing the CSS language, cascading style sheets, and we've been discussing how it's an entirely different language, separate from HTML, that is going to allow us to style the content that we've been creating for the last couple of weeks. Right. The first assignment. Walked us through how to use HTML to create a rough layout of the content, right, using headings and paragraphs and lists and tables and whatnot. So have a fairly rough layout of the content, and we said that we would come back a little later to revisit that content to make it look a little more presentable, and that's where we've been. Right, we've been discussing how to use CSS. Which is basically a language that allows us to describe how an HTML document should look like, right? It allows us to select different nodes in the HTML DOM, right? And refer to them using regular expressions, right? Some kind of expression, the CSS expressions, that we call them rules. And once we can refer to them, we can then specify what do we want them to look like, what fonts, what size, what foreground, background color, and so that's what we've been learning about, right? We will quickly realize that as much as we can learn about CSS, it's a different thing to actually make things look pretty and presentable, right? For that, you need a kind of an artistic eye to present something in a pleasing way. So we're kind of gonna give up on trying to make things look pretty. We'll be content with at least just learning the language and being able to read it and edit it and know that certain things do certain behaviors on the screen. So instead, when we come back later next week, we'll be using a library written by professional CSS developers. And we're going to link that in. In our case, we're going to be using Bootstrap, but there's a plethora of libraries out there, and we're going to use it as a baseline look and feel. Right, it's going to make it easy for us to create presentable lists and tables and headings and paragraphs. But in particular, it's going to allow us to very easily make our content responsive. Right. That it can easily adapt to different sizes of screens, tablets, phones, right, with very little effort. Yeah, so that's where we're going. It's still going to be static content, right? It's not like we won't be able to edit content right on the application or create content or delete content, right? It'll still be static. The only thing that we're going to be adding that is dynamic is that content will be responsive, right? It will adapt to different sizes. It will hide certain things, show different content based on the size of the screen, and that's all CSS, right? No JavaScript there. So when we come back later, we'll introduce JavaScript and React.js to make our content dynamic, right? Responsive to user input, right? As users click and drag and type at the keyboard, we will adapt data structures in the background, right, that then will render an equivalent user interface. Okay. Anyway, so that's a plan for the next several weeks. The second quiz won't be for another 2 weeks from today. Again, in our second lecture, right, of whatever week that is, that will be the week of the fourth week. Will be a quiz on CSS. Right, so all the material that we've been covering. Starting this week, all the way through next week, and so that's what's going to be in quiz 2. And 2 weeks after that, it'll be halfway through the course. It'll be the first midterm. It'll be the midterm exam or exam 1, right? Which will be all the material, including JavaScript, in class. Right, it'll be the whole lecture. All right. Anyway, that's the plan for the next several weeks. Any questions? All right. Yeah. So let's go. So I did want to, now that we've covered some of the basics content of CSS. We introduced it. We went through the slides. I did want to go over the assignment, the second assignment, and perhaps get you going, right? Getting you started on some of that. As all my assignments, there are several sections, of which you are responsible for the first two, right? The lab section and the Canvas section, right? And they're all, the purpose for them of them is always the same, right? The lab section is meant for you to practice a certain set of skills, right? Of learning, the very basics of CSS, of learning how to select elements in the DOM, how to transform their look and feel, using IDs or using the names of the elements, or classes or combination, right, of the structure of the document, and then how to tweak the look and feel of the fonts, the colors, the justification, and so this is a set of exercises, right? They're all kind of throwaway exercises, right? You just the main point is to let you practice a particular or a very specific skill, but most of them are just copy paste, right? Where you copy the code that we give you, you paste it into your document, you confirm that it renders or it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? But I encourage you not to just blindly copy and paste the content, right? That you try to follow along and perhaps extend the exercise a little more, perhaps do one on your own, invent your own little exercise, just to confirm that you understand what you're copy and pasting in there. Again, also there's a lot of text that goes along with each exercise that kind of explains what the exercise is doing, right? Don't skip over them. I get a lot of questions on Piazza, asking me something and says, wait a minute, it's explained in the text. Yes. Right, exactly. So each each assignment should be added to the hyperlink at the beginning in the index.html, right? So when in your public index.html, you should have a link to all the assignments. So this is the root index.html that allows you to navigate to where assignment 1 is implemented, assignment 2 is implemented, okay? Yeah, and also Canvas. So the root URL, the root index.html gives you access to everything else, right? And again, every assignment asks you to submit the same exact thing, which is the GitHub repository of where your source code is, right? And the second one is where is this deployed on Netlify, right? Which each assignment will have a different branch, right? So in this case, for our second assignment, is branch A2, yes? Right, so do all your work on A2 so that you're not going to override anything that you've done on previous assignments, right? So the TAs are still, they're grading A1 right now, yes? But you can confidently keep working on assignment 2 without worrying that you are going to overwrite anything for assignment 1, right? So they're completely separate. Yes. That's fine. As long as you give us a link to whatever it is that you want us to grade, and the code is actually there. Yeah. The intent. So it doesn't matter to us what is that you give us the link. The intent to separate them is so that you can keep working on future assignments without worrying about previous one. That's all. Yes. Okay. That's fine. So we're going to be very lenient in this first assignment. If you're a day or two and you're resubmitting something trivial as that, right? We're not going to count it against you. Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah. So let's go over the assignment. We were saying the first section of the assignment is labs, where you practice certain skills. The second one is Canvas, that asks you to take all those skills that you've been practicing and in the labs, and then ask you, well, actually build something, right? Apply those and build something. And in this one, we're not hand holding you, right? We're just saying this is what it's supposed to look like. This is how it's supposed to behave. Apply all the skills that you've learned in the labs, right, to make this true, right, to make it happen, right? And then you're kind of on your own, right? So that's so the first one is very, very hand holding you. The second one is you're kind of on your own, make this happen. And then there's a section at the end which is only pertaining to graduate students. Yeah, so make sure to work in assignment 2. Let's see. Okay, so labs. All right, so the first couple of lab exercises, asks you to present the idea of CSS as a language that allows you to modify the look and feel of tags, right? And that you can apply those styles either using several methods, right? Using the style attribute, right? Using the style block elements, right? Or using an entirely different CSS file, and then you link it, right? So the first couple of exercises kind of walk you through this of using first a style attribute, then using the style tag, so moving your code to the style tag, and finally, having it declare in a separate file, right, and then linking it. Okay, so this gives you a chance to practice that. Okay. Then the next several exercises walk you through learning about selectors, right? How is it that you can create rules, CSS rules that allow you to select or target certain specific elements, nodes in the tree, right? And then once you've identified them, apply these specific look and feel, properties of changing background color, foreground color, fonts, and whatnot. Yes. So there's several exercises. One is using ID selectors, right, where you can use the hash sign to be able to target a specific element that has a unique identifier, right? How to use class selectors, right, where you can declare your own name, right, a identifier, and then by using the dot, putting a dot in front of it, you can then apply that transformation, this particular transformation, and then apply it to different elements in the screen, so that you can start painting stuff with foreground blue and then the background yellow, right? And I just caught a typo. It's supposed to be WD. Okay. Notice that all my classes, right, are supposed to follow this naming convention, WD dash. See that? If you find a class that's not doing that, let me know so I can. It's a typo. They're all supposed to say WD. So that, why WD? So later on next week, when we start using Bootstrap and Font Awesome, right? It's actually a common practice in when you start working using in a real development environment. It's very common that your team will use several libraries, right? Including libraries, CSS libraries that are written by your team, right? Your institution or wherever you work, right? That they own that library. It's their specific their intellectual property. But then also they'll be using libraries that are they purchased, right, or are open source and whatnot. So your code will have a combination, right, of classes that are your own and classes that belong to someone else. Yes, and it's useful to be able to quickly identify whether this class is mine, I wrote it, or is this someone else's, right? And so if this were C# or Python or C++ or whatnot, typically you would put things under a particular package name, right? And those package names usually you will have maybe the domain name of your company, right? And so you would know that these classes and functions and that you wrote, right, belong, they're intellectual property of the company, right? And you identify them as such, putting them in the correct package and whatnot. Yes, and you'll have other third-party libraries that you will be using in your code, right? So they're very well identifiable which one are yours and which one are someone else's by the package name. So the equivalent here is to, as a practice, as a naming convention practice, is to prepend all your classes that you wrote, right, with some nomenclature, right, or some token, right? So in this class, we're going to be using, any class that you create here in any CSS class that you create in this course, prepended with the token WD, WD for web dev, right? And so you'll be able to quickly identify them as, oh yeah, these classes I wrote, right, for my project, for my whatever, right? So as opposed to a class that you're using from material design or Tailwind or Bootstrap, okay? And then you'll know which ones are yours or not, okay? All right, so yeah, so this is a particular transformation that I gave it a name. I gave it a name like class selector, and then I can use that, where anything that I want to paint blue and yellow, I can apply that look and feel to this heading, to this paragraph, or anywhere I want to apply that style, right? I can apply it by using the class attribute. Make sense? Right. All right, then this one's a little more involved. Let's play around with this one. So let's see. I do want to demonstrate this one. Let's see. npm start. Okay. So lab 2. Okay, so lab 2, we have some of this. We were talking about floating. Oh, okay. So we lab 2. So lab 2. Right. So we have this code here, right, where we have this div, right, and we have, notice that this particular div is the parent of this other div. See that, right? So this heading and this div are inside this parent div, right? So they're creating a hierarchy, okay? And this other div, this WD selector 3, is inside this one, and then that one is inside. So it's kind of like it creates that this is the parent of this one, and this was the parent of that one, and this is the parent of that one. So there's a nesting in between, right? So we can say that this is the parent of this child, but it's the grandparent of this other one. See that? Right? And it's the great parent of that one. Make sense? So there's an ancestry relationship between them, right? How deep they are in the node. Because remember, this gets converted into a tree of nodes, right, that has multiple branches, right, that allows us to navigate this data structure all the way, from the top all the way down to the bottom. So you can create rules, CSS rules, based on the relative position, right, of one element related to another one. Okay. So for instance, you could create a rule that says, oh, I want to target this one, or all my children are direct descendants of me, right? Right. So for instance, H3 and div and this div are direct descendants of this one over here, correct? Or you could say, I want to target all my ancestors, right? Starting from the third level or something, right? And the way you do that is by using special characters, right? In the CSS, we can see. Okay, I don't have it here. By using these types of rules. So that rule here, what that rule is saying, right? Notice the space in between. See that space in between? This says, right, that I am targeting an element that has this specific class, but it has to have an ancestor, right, that has this class. If it doesn't have that ancestor, then it will not apply it. You see that? Right. So a space in between is creating a path. It's defining a path between these two, right? But there could be any number of of intermediate parents or grandparents between this one and that one, right? Whereas if you put a greater than sign over here, a greater than sign means that it's an immediate descendant, meaning my immediate child. Okay, right? So this is so for instance, yes, 3 is an immediate child of 2, and 4 is an immediate child of 3. So this applies, right? So if you don't follow the structure, it doesn't apply. All right. So yeah, so this exercise walks you through learning about the relationship between in the path. So this is very similar to what you normally do when you're navigating through a file structure, right? If you say CD and you give it a file structure, right? You use the character slash, right, to separate the directory names, right? To refer to specific file or specific directory in the file path, and the file path are hierarchical. So same thing here, right? The DOM is a hierarchical data structure, and right, you want to be able to navigate or be able to to refer to different elements in this data structure to then apply certain things. Same thing like you do in a file system, right? If you say ls and you provide a directory structure, you can go up and down, dot to go up, and then follow a particular path, right, into a particular file. Yes, right, and then you can apply all sorts of operation. I want to rename it, I want to move it somewhere, right? I want to delete it, right? And you can apply different operations to different files or different directory structures. Same thing here, right? Here is we are selecting a specific path or node, right, or leaves in this data structure, and then these are the commands, right, that we want to apply to those particular elements. That makes sense? Yes. All right. Yeah. So right, we already play around with styling, foreground color or background color, and we discussed the box model, right, as a rectangular representation of everything that is being rendered on the screen, margins and paddings and whatnot. So yeah, we discussed that already, and that you can style the corners. So again, all these exercises is for you to practice all these various concepts. Okay. I did want to take a look at the floating. All right, so we discussed floating. Did I demo a floating? I don't believe I did. Did I? Right, no, we didn't. Okay, so yeah, so let's discuss that a bit. So yeah, so say you have a particular lab 2 here. Say you have a paragraph. Load them. Let's create it. Let's make it a little longer. So you have a big paragraph, right? And say you have an image. Right? So you load up an image and have maybe I think I have an image somewhere in here. Images Tesla bot. Right. So let's load an image of the Tesla bot. So there it is. So it's a Tesla bot. Now what happens if I put this image somewhere in the middle of the text, like over here? Notice that what it wants to do is that it wants to behave like an inline element. See that? Right? It wants to render in the same direction, the same flow as the rest of the content. Right? So the content just was wrapping around. It reached over here. It found the image, renders the image, and then it continues. Yes. Right. And the bottom edge of the image aligns with the bottom edge of the text. Yes. So that's the default behavior. Right. And if you have several images, they just render one after another. Okay. So the when Tim Berners-Lee was coming up with this mechanism, right, of drawing images, right? They wanted to kind of do what you can do in publishing, right, where you have, for instance, when you have a text that wraps around images, like this over here, for instance, right? In this example, you have an image, right, and the rest of the content is kind of like wrapping around. See that? It's flowing around the text. Right? Notice that I can move this around, and the text just flows around. So they want to have something like that, right? Where so you can put diagrams and molecules and atoms and whatever, right? Images of their research papers. Yes, right. So they wanted to be able to publish content like this. So one of the things that they came up with was floating, right? The idea to float an image, right? To just all of a sudden just be stuck on the right or be stuck on the left, and then have the rest of the content just flow around it. Okay? So, for instance, this image, right, that right now just renders in the middle, right? We can fix that by putting a style and say that the float is, you can float it left or you can float it right. Okay, notice what happens to the content. See that, right? Now, wherever the top edge was stays there. That doesn't move, right? That's where it was. But then the left edge now is aligned with the left edge of the window of the screen. See that, right? And you can float it either way. You can float it right or left. Actually, let me add more content down here. More lorem ipsum. Just so you could see that I just want lots of text to float around. You can float it left or you can float it right. You can say float left, you can say float right. Again, it just pushes out the content to the edge of the screen. Make sense? Well, not of the screen, of whoever the container is. Right? So if this is instead of a table, right, you could also float it to the right-hand side of a column, right? So whoever the parent is. Right now the parent is the body, right? So somebody looked at this, right, and kind of explored this idea a little further, right? Let's put it back to the left. Somebody explored this idea and says, "Oh, what happens if I have several images?" So if I have several images, notice what happens, right? They all want to kind of, they have like a magnet that pulls them all the way to the left, but they don't overlap. They kind of like stack next to each other, right? So somebody looked at this and said, "Wait a minute, this looks very much like a row with multiple columns, right? Could I use this to my own advantage, perhaps to do things that I want to lay out horizontally, right?" So people started asking, well, can I apply that same thing to maybe to content like paragraphs? If I have two paragraphs, right? If I have two paragraphs like that, right, that would normally render one on top of the other, what if I wanted to render them, right, in a horizontally in a row, like multiple columns? So first of all, I would need to make them narrower, right, as narrow as many columns as I would want. Right, so for instance, if I want this to be rendered in two columns that are of equal width, right, what I could do is I could make them both perhaps the width, change them to 50%. Right, so the first one, this one 50%, right, and the other one too. So they're both now 50%. Notice that they still behave as blocks, right? Meaning they still, even though I have space over there, right, that I would expect this maybe to wrap and put it and fill that void over there, they still are behaving like blocks, meaning they're still adding the vertical spacing, yes? And also because when it becomes narrower, right, they automatically grow, in height, to accommodate the content that is inside. That's typical block behavior, right? So yeah, so somebody thought of this, okay, well, all right, now I'd like to put them side by side, and let's see if the float behavior will help us there. I can apply also float left, right? In both instances, float left and float left. And lo and behold, it behaves as what I expected, right? That I can render this instead of having, vertical spacing, I can have them rendered in horizontal, right? So this idea just opened up a lot of opportunities, right? Of laying out stuff in different ways. Say, what about if I want to render maybe 3 columns, right? 3 columns. What I could do is maybe this one could be 33, this could be 33, and this could be maybe 34. Right? So I could lay it out maybe in 3 columns, right? Or if this were maybe on the left side could be maybe a sidebar, and on each side would be 2 sidebars, and in the middle the main content could take up maybe a little more space, right? Right. So a combination of these sizes and float and whatnot, right, created a new opportunities of laying out this in much more complex way without misusing tables. Right now we can go back and start using tables to what they were originally intended, right, for just tabular data, rows, columns, numbers and stuff like that, right, with similar schema, similar data structures and whatnot, right. So we can leave tables alone and come back and use this instead, right? So we kind of like stopped misusing tables, but now we're kind of misusing floats, right? Because floats were not intended for this, right? The original intent of floats was to apply them to images so that you could have that behavior of text flowing around. Yes. Okay. But nevertheless, this is a legitimate alternative. And we'll see that Bootstrap uses this technique to, and standardizes it, and does it, it creates a whole set of classes that is going to allow us to do things like that. For instance, we can declare here columns. We can say, I want to create my own column. Column of 20%, right? Where this is going to be a float left, right? And the width is going to be 20%, right? And then I can create another one of 60%, and everything in between, right? I can create 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, right? That I can then combine. Yes. Then it wraps. Right? If it doesn't fit, it just starts wrapping. Yeah, which is fine, right? It's behaving like inline now, right? Where it doesn't fit, then it comes back, which is actually good if you want to do some grids that as you move them, they'll just wrap around and just fill the void. That's perfectly fine. Which is actually one of the behaviors that I'm asking you to do for the canvas a little later. Yep. So once you declare that, you can come back and create your own paragraphs, right? The class can be WD column 20%. And oh, do I have several of these? Uh-oh. Did I declare it already? Oh no, okay. And so this could be lorem ipsum, declare a couple of these. And then in the middle, I can say 60. And it doesn't work. Wait, what? Did I misspell it? Oh, okay. There we go. Oh, yeah. So another thing, I think I'm using the wrong CSS. Is it this one? 20, float left, 20%, 80. Oops. Huh? WD 80%. Oh, 80%. I meant 60%. 60%. 60%. And this is 60%. And this is 60. Okay. There we go. Right. So we can instead of applying the style directly, right, on the paragraphs, we can declare these utility classes, right, that we can then use to, right, just apply these styling and lay it out any which way we want. Yes. Right. So Bootstrap, as we'll see later on next week, has perfected this technique, right, so that we can now go back and start, laying out this content of columns, right, and rows and whatnot, and apply and implement these different types of layout, right? So this assignment walks you through doing that, right? In the styling, blah blah blah, styling position, asks you to learn about positions, learn about float, right, and then create different types of layout. Practice doing a left side, right side, a third on the left, and 2/3 on the right, or 20%, 60%, and then 20%. So different layouts, right? And so you can practice that. Now, an alternative to that layout, this is still kind of like a hack, right? We're misusing the float for this particular purpose, which is a legitimate purpose, right, of trying to lay out stuff horizontally. But a much more modern solution is to use Flexbox, right? Flexbox is a CSS set of styles, right, and rules that allows to implement. They're specifically designed for being able to easily, style horizontal layouts, right? Whereas float is kind of like a hack to do that, right? Float are dedicated out of the box, meant for this purpose, right? So Flex works with defines a. It works only with divs, and allows you to define a container div that is the parent or contains several other divs inside of it, right? And its most simple implementation is to apply the display flex on the parent, and then immediately, all of a sudden, right, all the children, right, render horizontally, right? So let me demonstrate real quick. If you have here just a couple of divs here, where you have maybe on the left you have the canvas navigation, right, and then you have the course navigator, right, and then you have the modules, and finally on the right hand side you might have the status, right? In general, this would render as you would expect, right, using blocks, yes, right, each one taking up it's a specific line, right, and pushing everything down, creating a vertical layout, yes. But just by adding here the display to be flex, so by default this is block, right? By default, all these divs are behaving like block elements, right? If you inspect them, you'll see that they all have a display block by default. See that, right? But you can override it and say, I don't want block. That's your default display. I want you to use flex. And just like that, immediately they become horizontal, right? They become like a row. Yes. So I'm suggesting you use flex, but you can try also float, either one. Bootstrap has classes that already do this just by applying these classes, right? So you don't have to think of whether to use one or the other. You could just the Bootstrap classes, and it automatically does it. So we can take a look at we can just paint this real quick with some styling, some background color, so you can follow along. So this is maybe do gold. So that one's that first one. So you can distinguish them. So aqua. So it's that one, and that last one. Oops. Oh, modules, and then the status. You have that last one, right? And so also the default is that now the behavior of Flex is that the width, instead of being their default, the whole width of the screen, right? Notice that if I turn off Flex, right? If I turn off Flex and I go back to the default block, the behavior is that they all want to take the entire width of the screen. Yes, right. Regardless of what the content is, and the height is given by whatever the content is inside. Right. They expand vertically. More as there's more content inside. Right. But the width is always the whole width of the screen. But if you change that to Flex, then now they're behaving like inlines now, right? You have that the width is given, the width and the height is both given by the whatever content you have inside. Okay. Now one of the behaviors that we might want to do is that we would like this to be kind of like behave like a row, and then specify that yes, some of them can take up the width of their content, but some of them I would want them to stretch out and take up whatever space is available. Yes, right. And so to do that, you can specify that this should behave like a row, flex direction row. Right, so this could be flex direction row, and then specify that the growth. Right, there's several criteria of growth, right, and they're just numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the flex grow 1 means take up the remaining space of the of whatever is left, right? So you can apply that to a specific one. You can say I want this one to grow, I want that one to grow, and there it is, right? It grows, taking up whatever remaining space there is. And it's responsive, right? As you make them, narrower, notice that indeed it takes up, whatever remaining space is, and gives just and it stretches to fill in that void. Make sense? Right. So what I'm suggesting for this assignment, we're going to replace all those tables that we've been using throughout the to implement the modules, the home, the grades, the assignments, right? And just replace the tables and the rows and the TDs, yes, with these divs. Okay? And you could just wholesale replace them, right? And so we'll demonstrate that today. Right. So yeah. So this assignment, the lab 2, walks you through learning about and practicing using these styles, right? Right. So then we're going to learn about Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is one of, again, many libraries that create tons and tons of these usable classes, right? That allow us to lay out stuff. We're going to do that a little later. I did want you to get started with the it walks you through achieving the same kind of layout, but this time around using Bootstrap classes that already do this instead of us doing it from scratch and running it ourselves, right? Bootstrap creates a nice consistent set of classes that allow you to lay out stuff in different ways. It also allows you to adapt to the size of the screen, right? So that for instance, this one allows you to, for instance, declare a row, and then configure the inside columns to behave differently in different screen sizes. Right. So for instance, these are 4 rows. These are 4 rows. See that? So in very wide screens, it's totally fine to, render all the columns, right, in a row like that, and then you would have, you would have independent rows like columns like that. But in smaller screens, maybe half the size of the screen, these columns would be too narrow. Yes, the content would be way too narrow. So you can configure this to flip and say, well, now instead of 4 columns, I'm going to only render 2 columns, but they are wider. Right? They're wider so they're not so narrow that I can't read the content. Yes, right. Something, for instance, if you have a newspaper, it's very common that you have tons of columns. It's okay to have 12 columns because the newspaper is so wide. Yes, but then if you try to put that in a magazine, 12 columns would be way too narrow to be able to fit in a magazine. So you would switch maybe to 6 columns or 4. Make sense? And then when you go to a tablet or something, maybe it's 3 columns. But then when you go onto a phone, you would decide, well, maybe I should just have one long, very tall column. Make sense? Right. So Bootstrap allows you to switch, right, and say, I want a row. It allows you to say, well, in extra large screens, what they do is that they split up the screen into 12 equal columns. And then you can specify that each of your columns takes up so many columns. Right. So for instance, if it's 4 columns, then each one would have to be 3 wide, right, to take up the entire 12. Yes, 12 is 100%. Right. So if it's 4 and each is 3, 3, 3, and 3, the whole thing adds up to 12, 100%. So that's what this says, right? In extra large screen, this is 3 wide, 3, 3, 3, 3. But as it's becoming narrower and narrower, when I get to medium-sized screens, I switch to 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Right? See that? So they're all half. So the whole screen is this wide, and each one is half the whole width. Right? 6 and 6 is 12. And these, because they don't fit, right, they just wrap around and they show display underneath. See that? Right? And then as it becomes narrower and narrower in extra small, which is the default, that's why it doesn't have XS, they take up the whole screen, 12, 12, 12, 12. So it's just one big column, right? And that you would see on a phone, right? On a small screen like a phone. See that? So we'll see later on when we get to Bootstrap. It defines all these classes and the sizes that you want to be at different screen sizes, and it allows you to be responsive. So the same exact content can be consumed in any number of screen sizes. All right, but we'll do that next week. And so it allows you to play around with a lot of different layouts, tables, lists, forms. Okay, so let's take a look at Canvas. Oh, also icons. We'll see icons a little later. So for Canvas, right, we want to go back to the what we worked on last week, right, and try now that we are have practiced how to use CSS. We know that we can override the look and feel. We know how to change the background color, foreground color, and stuff like that. Yes, and so we're going to revisit our web pages that we built in the last assignment, and we're going to refactor them so that we're going to try and make them look as close as this, right? So it is not required that your pages be pixel perfect, equal to what I have here, but certainly there has to be a demonstrable effort, right, to make them look as close as this. So definitely the fact that the width has to be narrow, that the background should be black, right? That the text should be white, that there should be some spacing in between, right? Between the text above it and the image below. You have to use icons, right? They don't have to be these exact icons, but something in the same theme, right? They do have to be red. Depending on whether you are looking at account or courses or dashboard, right? It needs to be highlighted white with a white background with the text red, right? Also, the second sidebar for navigation sidebar, the background should be white. The hyperlink should be red, right? Depending if you're looking at the profile screen, it should be highlighted with the text black and a border right on the left-hand side black, right? Also, there should be some spacing in between, nicely spaced. There should be some margins between the left side and the right-hand side, right? And there's a specific width that I asked for, right? So so I capture all these requirements listed here, right? The icons must be red, the account icon must be white. Icons don't have to match exactly, but you find icons that are similar. Font sizes must be similar, right? The width of the sidebar should be between 75 and 85 pixels wide. Again, we're not gonna get a ruler and check to see if the pixels are, if this is pixel perfect, but we're just gonna look at it. If it's general look and feel, looks somewhat what's in here, then you're good. Okay. Again, no pixel perfect. What else? Also make an effort to make the profile screen look like this, where again, also the font cannot be the default font. Not the default font is Times New Roman. So use something like Verdana or Arial or some other fonts, right? That's not the default font, right? So choose something that looks similar to that. It doesn't have to be identical, but make an effort to make it look something like this. So these are all headings, right? Change the text to be black. I think that's a hyperlink. Hyperlinks are all red. Okay. Also the input fields as well, right? Notice that the input fields have a little bit of rounded corners. Okay. So text area also has a rounded corner over here. And so again, make an effort to make it look like that. Also this icon, render that as well. So here's a new screen that we're asking you to implement, the dashboard screen. And dashboard screen is it has its own hyperlink, right? In the Canvas navigator, should be highlighted when we are looking at the dashboard, and it's responsive. Responsive meaning in a wide screen it shows 4 columns, but as it becomes narrower and narrower and it doesn't fit, right? It wraps. Okay, it wraps and it continues below, so it's 3 columns. As it gets narrower and narrower, then it renders as 2 columns, and then narrower again, it's just 1 column, and then eventually it's so narrow that it can't even fit the navigation, right? And it's hidden, it goes away. See that, right? So implementing this with Bootstrap is trivial. Right, very easy to implement with Bootstrap, and that's what we're going to do. Right, we're going to use Bootstrap to do this. Also, here, this rendering can be easily implemented using Bootstrap. If you go to Bootstrap, if you look at cards, cards already have a set of classes and divs that you can copy. You can just copy this, right? And by linking the CSS from Bootstrap, you get something like that, right? You can render cards like that, right? And there's a whole bunch of examples they give you that you can use to style it, and they give you the snippet. Feel free to use these snippets from Bootstrap as is, right? So you can copy them and paste them in your HTML document, right? And play around with them. Right. Certainly, you'll have to add your own margins. You have to add some margins to the left, margins above, so that they're spaced out. Right. The home screen, we're going to re-implement that so that instead of using tables, we're going to use Flex. Right. We'll use Flex. We'll set a width for each one of these. 75 pixels, 120 pixels. This one's going to stretch, right? That was also going to be like, I don't know, like 200 pixels wide, right? and the one in the middle just stretches, taking up the remaining width, right? But it's going to be responsive, so that when it's at its widest, right, it's showing 4 columns. But as it becomes narrower and narrower, this one, we sacrifice the last column. We hide it. It's gone, right? You can't see it. You know, as it becomes narrower and narrower, right, we sacrifice the first 2. The first 2 columns go away, right? So that we can take up the rest of the screen like that. Right? Now, we still have to be able to navigate though, right? We still have to be able to, navigate to different portions. So what we do is that we're gonna hide these 2, but they're now going to be available as icons up here. See that? So that if we want to navigate to the dashboard, we click, and this appears, right? It appears a separate navigation screen that allows you to navigate to the dashboard or the account or calendar or whatever, right? Or if you press this top one, we get this navigation that allows us to navigate to the grades, to the assignments, right? To the home, right? And for the graduate students, they can navigate to the settings. Okay, make sense? Right? And as this becomes wider and wider, right? It goes back to this layout. If it becomes wider and wider, it goes back to this layout. Make sense? Right? Again, with Bootstrap, creating this responsive behavior is trivial, right? And hiding stuff or showing stuff, as the size of the screen appears, widens and not is fairly trivial. Okay. Assignment screen, I think, is just asks you to make it look as close as possible. This table also is going to be restyled, and you can use the Bootstrap Tables. If you look at Bootstrap Tables, just by adding the table class to a table, boom, it looks prettier already, right? It becomes 100%. The borders look prettier, right? And you can then style different colors for the rows to highlight them. You can use striped, table stripe class, so that it it highlights the every other row, right, automatically, right, so that it looks more like what it's required. So for instance, the striping can be accomplished very easily with the table striped class applied to the table, right? Also, another behavior that we're asking is that that we could not implement earlier is that the content here can be very, very wide, right? Lots of assignments, quizzes, exams, projects, right? Could be lots and lots of very, very very, very wide, right? And it wouldn't fit in the screen. So the current implementation might force the browser to render a scroll bar, right, at the bottom, which we want to avoid, right? So Bootstrap provides responsive tables, right? Which you can apply the table responsive class to a table that is so wide that it doesn't fit, right? That it will cause the table to be responsive. See that? Right? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And what it does is that it adds scroll bars to just the table. See that? Right? So that you can still access the content, right? But it doesn't force a scroll bar on the whole document. It only puts the scroll bars on the table. Make sense? Which is totally fine, right? That you can scroll the tables, but not the remaining of the document. Okay, make sense? Right. All right. So let's take a look at playing around, applying these techniques to one at least one of the Canvas screens. So here's the Canvas screen for the home document, and if we look at it, it has been refactored. Home screen, Canvas courses home screen. So notice that instead of tables, we've taken the same UL that used to be inside of a TD. Remember that? Remember that? Right? And that TD used to be inside of a TR, correct? Right? And then the TR used to be inside of a table. So we can refactor that and have, instead of a table, it would be a div with a flex row container, right? And then so let's look at that implementation. What does it do? So that class is declared here. No, where is it? Where'd it go? Home screen. Okay, it's looking at these styles in the styles.css. Styles.css, this one right here. See, it declared it at the display flex and then direction, flex direction row. See that? And just by doing that, right? These this div, that div, and then the course navigator, and then the modules, right, and the status, right, are now behaving like columns, right, and rendering horizontally. Make sense? Right? Yes. Yep. So proper HTML, we are using head, right? So if this is a screen that is meant to be rendered a full document, then yes, right? But if you have a snippet like these over here, these are code snippets that are meant to be copied and pasted, right? Then they're not meant to be consumed as whole documents, right? Like we remember, I implemented the Canvas Navigator and the Course Navigator as separate little snippets, yes, so that I can work on them independently. So those make sense not to put them inside of a full HTML document. But if it's meant to be a full HTML document, then yes, it should have its full HTML, head, body, and everything. Okay, and that's where we're going to go, right? When we get to React.js and JavaScript and whatnot, basically there will be one single, top level HTML head body, yes, that loads all the other snippets dynamically, yeah, where all the snippets are just pieces of HTML that together get concatenated into one big HTML document, correct? Right? And they will be wrapped inside of functions, right? So that you can import them and reuse them and render wherever you want a piece of content, right? You can just invoke that particular function, and you can just paint your content with functions that are iterating over data structures, right? And they're dynamically generating content based on some complex JSON object. Yes, so that's where we're going. Right? We're not there quite yet, but in that theme, right? We have snippets that they're just pieces of HTML, right? They're not meant to be consumed as entire documents. Yes, right. So yeah. So for instance, in the Canvas Navigator, we can navigate to it real quick. And this is the Canvas navigation. So here's me trying to create that Canvas Navigator, right? Independently of everything else. Trying to implement the width, trying to implement the background, the foreground color. Let's take a look. Right. So what I did here is that first I created a local CSS file, right, that has specific classes that are targeting my specific UL, right, that I wrapped with a WD Canvas Navigator declared in a local CSS file. And I'm saying that the background should be black of this list, yes, that the foreground should be white, right, that I don't want any padding. I want the width of this UL to be 80, right? Usually it's a block element. It would take up the entire width of the screen, right? So I'm narrowing to be 80 pixels. I'm overriding the font to be Arial, and I'm making the font size a little smaller, right? Font size, the EM is a measure of size that is relative to the normal size, right? Yes. Typically, you would declare this once, perhaps in the root CSS file, right? Here, I'm declaring here because only because I'm trying to target this specific component. But yes, a good idea would be not to declare these two things here, right? Or maybe this. This is too general, right? This font family is going to apply to the entire document, not just to my Canvas Navigator, right? So perhaps a good idea would be to declare this in something a little higher, right? I could say instead in a top level, maybe style. Let's see, under public, do I have I have a style CSS, right? And we could target the entire document. We can say, the entire body followed by all the documents, by all the elements in there. I want to change the font family to be Arial, right? So now, right, that's going to be applied to all the elements under the body tag, all of them, so that I can, if I navigate back to, if I go back to my home screen, notice that indeed, I am loading that global style sheet, right? That is setting the font to be this Arial font. Make sense? Right. So yeah, if where you declare things at a higher level or narrowly into a specific index CSS, it's the same question you would have about implementing classes or functions in object design, right? Where you define your classes, your hierarchy of classes, right? In software engineering. Yeah, so that the question of abstraction. How many layers do you want, right? What can be reused? Should this be declared at a higher context so that it can be reused by other components in the system, right? So those are the same kind of design questions that you have about classes and functions. Those also apply here with the CSS, right, and HTML of things being reused. Where do I declare this? Does this only apply to this specific HTML element, or does it apply to something wider and should be declared in a more general sense? Make sense? So yes, I could remove this. I could remove that, but now this one has the wrong font. That's okay. In my local Canvas Navigator, I'm loading my index.css, but I can also load my global style sheet, right? So that I can take a look at what it looks like, right? I can say, link. I think it's that one. Is it? Yeah. So I'm loading that style sheet again. See that? Right. So this allows me to come up with this implementation, and then I can just copy this. Right. Copy this. Once I'm happy with this, I can move it over to where this goes, which is on the courses, home, in the screen. Right. Again, I can replace my my Canvas Navigator here, right? I can replace it and just put in that. The only difference probably is that I have this WD Canvas Navigator. So I need to load that index file, right? I need to load that. So link, and it would be under where? It would be under up one, down to, I guess, up one again, Canvas Navigator, and then the CSS. Right, so if I go back, notice that now my Canvas Navigator, right, is rendering with black background, white text in the foreground. So I would have. So once I'm happy with that, notice I've added the margins above and below, and then I would continue to the next one, right? To see if I can play around with the Course Navigator. So the Course Navigator, I implemented here, right? So let's take a look at it. Let's see, course. So courses. And then the course navigation, it's that one. So I want this to look like something like what? This over here, right? Something like that. So the foreground red, right? Some spacing in between, no bullets, right? So, and also the one that's selected would have this, this bar on the left. Yes. All right, so let's try and do that. So here's the course navigator. Let's create a dedicated index file, a CSS file for this index.css. And we can declare a class for this. So class, and we'll call this the course, WD course navigation, right? And we'll load that index file just to link the local index file. We'll also need the global style sheet, right, which is styles, I think. And so we can navigate. Did it find it? Link, rel, blah, blah, blah. Styles, is that what it's called? Styles.css. There it is. So notice that the font is the correct one, right? We can in our CSS index.css, we can change the we can declare this class now. We can declare this class and start styling it, right? I want the background color to be, I don't know, if I change it to aqua, it would change to aqua, but that's not what I want, right? I think I want it to be white. I can style the line items below, right? I can say, I can change the width. I think the width was 120 pixels. I forget what the assignment says. And also we can style the line items to have none, meaning I don't want any bullets, right? I want some margins below, and I want some, so I can remove the bullets right from the left side. I can the UL, I want to remove the margins on or padding. So padding, maybe 0 padding. So no padding, so it's flush to the left-hand side. Or maybe I do want some margins. I think there needs to be some margins between the left-hand side and my list here. So I can maybe add some margins on the left, maybe 20 pixels. The assignment tells you how much margin. So some margins from the left side. The hyperlinks, I might want to style them so that they don't look so ugly. So they're black and no decoration. So remove any underlining, right, or any they're still hyperlinks. They still behave like hyperlinks, but they don't render as hyperlinks, right? Also, the text, I think, supposed to render as red like this. So the text is not black but red. I mean, the exact color doesn't matter, right? But reddish. And also the ones that is highlighted, the particular line item that is highlighted, we can change the border on the right hand side to be maybe 1 pixel black and solid. Actually, no, left. We can highlight that specific one, right? And maybe have some padding inside because it's flush. See, the text is flush. That looks ugly. So we can maybe have some internal padding on the left so that it's not so close to that piece of border. Maybe 10 pixels, or, away from that, right? So instead of the background color, this just helped me a bit. I don't want any more. Okay. Not all of them are highlighted, right? Only one of them is highlighted. And so instead of putting the border, highlighting all the borders, I could create a separate style that says that WD LI an LI which is active, or the selected one, or something like that. Then it's going to have the border left highlighted, right? Which none of them have. None of them have them unless I go in and actually select one. So say, for instance, if I want to select assignments, because I am in the assignments screen, I can add the class to be active, right? So that it highlights that specific hyperlink, right? And it will be different in different screens, right? If I'm in the home screen, then the home would be highlighted, right? If I am in the assignments, the assignments will be highlighted. If I'm in the grades will be highlighted. Make sense? Right. So once I have that, I can now go and copy this and reuse this. I can copy that and go back to my home screen, and replace my navigator here. Save that. We'll have to link in also the for the course navigation. So if I go back home and refresh, it doesn't work. Wait, what? I'm in the home screen, am I? Home screen. Is this the right place? I don't know. Let's see. Okay, course navigation index. Okay, there we go. Right. So now we have we added the canvas navigation has white on black, right? The course navigator now has red on white, right, with a highlight. Make sense? Right. So I can go in and reuse this and just paste it and start painting stuff, so it looks more what is the target. Make sense? All right. Yeah. So there you have it. So next week we'll take a look at Bootstrap and see how we can use that as a base styling, and we can override it, right, to make it look more customized to whatever we want to do. All right. Excellent. Thank you. I'll upload this. If you could start working on the labs and get that done maybe over this weekend, have that done so that Monday we could move forward. All right. Thank you, everyone.